I can imagine maybe in a long time writing another Molly book. Maybe, but not for a long time. She belongs to readers now.
I'm Michael Tamblyn. This is Kobo in Conversation. My guest is the mystery novelist Nita Prose. She's the author of the international bestseller The Maid. It's the story of Molly Gray, a 20-something hotel maid whose job perfectly suits her need for order and predictable routine. As tends to happen in mystery novels set in hotels, Molly then discovered a dead guest and found herself a suspect in the ensuing murder investigation, an investigation which she undertakes in parallel with the help of her friends. In Nita's latest book, The Maid's Secret, Molly is riding high. She's been promoted to head maid and special events manager. She's engaged to the love of her life, the dashing Juan Manuel, and she's just learned that she's the owner of a piece of art that might be worth millions. If, that is, she can find out who stole it on the day it was supposed to be sold at auction. Nita Prose, welcome to Kobo.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here speaking with you today, Michael.
As I explained in the intro, Molly has got a lot going on in this latest book, and we'll get to that. But where I want to start is where Molly started. If you can cast your mind back a few years, tell me about when you were starting to think that you had a book to write and that it would be The Maid.
Well, as you know, I had a whole other career at the time.
Yes.
And that's how we knew each other, in fact.
Yep.
I was an editor, and I worked with other writers to develop their work. And it had never occurred to me that I was going to switch sides and become a public figure by becoming a writer. But I was at the London Book Fair at the time, and I had a strange encounter with a maid in the hotel. I left for a meeting, and I came back early in the morning, opened the door, and she was cleaning my room. And I surprised her. She kind of jumped back and gasped. And the embarrassing part, and it really is embarrassing, it could have been slightly worse, but it was embarrassing. She had in her hands my track pants, which were dirty, disgusting, turned inside out and full of sweat because I'd gone for a run that morning before my meeting. And she was holding them and trying to nicely fold them and put them back on the bed for me. And she looked at me and I looked at her. I was humiliated, so was she. And I thought to myself, it is such an invisible and intimate job to be a roommate. You know, she'd been cleaning my room for days. She knew everything about me. She knew the medicines I took. She knew the jewelry I wore. She knew if somebody had been in my bed or not. She knew everything. And I knew nothing about her. And for some reason, just that little moment, we never spoke to each other. I never found out who she was and vice versa. But that little moment stuck in my head. And a few days later, while I was on my plane ride home, I started to hear a voice. And it was a maid's voice. It was Molly's, in fact. And I decided I was going to write what I was hearing. And that turned out to be the prologue for The Maid. And that is how I turned from becoming an editor to a writer on a napkin.
And I want to get into that transformation a little more in a second, but I want to stay with Molly right now because Molly started her first book as modest, practical, orderly. But tell me a bit about who she was in the first book and how she is changing by the time we see her in the third book.
When we meet her in the first book, she's really suffering from grief. Mm-hmm. You know, yes, the novel is a whodunit, and I want the reader to be collecting clues and wondering, who murdered Mr. Black. But it's really a novel that is about this young woman who is navigating the social world for the very first time on her own. She's lost her grandmother 9 months before when the book opens. And it's really about her trying to find herself, find a sense of community and a sense of confidence in who she is. And she's a bit of an unusual person. By the time we meet her in the second book, she's got some strength to her by this point.
She solved a murder.
She solved a murder when no one else could. And
yes.
In fact, what she learns is that some of her differences are actually her greatest strengths. And that's what the reader, I hope, comes to see too. Now, when we meet her in The Maid's Secret, she is altogether herself. She feels a sense of confidence. She's gotten a promotion. She's now a head maid. She's involved in all these exciting developments in the hotel. She's responsible for the tea room and all the big name events that happen there. And so the Molly we meet is, at a new point in her life, and yet again, there's a new challenge that happens.
And the book starts out with a special event at the Regency Grand Hotel. Tell us what's happening.
So there is a TV show that has come to film in the Grand Tea Room of the hotel. And it's called Hidden Treasures. It might look a lot like the Antiques Roadshow. And before the event actually gets started, before things start to film, Molly brings in some trinkets that used to belong to her gran. Those curio shelf contents that readers of previous books will recognize. And lo and behold, something that she always really loved, a worthless, not very valuable little trinket, turns out to be the real thing. It turns out to be something of immense value, and that is recognized right away. And of course, Molly passes out, because that's what she does when freaky things happen. Mm. She just decides to check out and lose consciousness altogether. And this sets off a course of action in the book, which puts her in grave danger, because suddenly she goes from a low-level maid to a multimillionaire in, the flash of an eye.
And The Maid Secret is something of a departure from the previous two novels, in that it's not a murder mystery. It is a crime, though. But Molly's the victim, not the suspect. Was this about creating a different kind of story for her? Or were you deliberately trying to move away from dead bodies turning up once a book?
Well, I was thinking about hotels, and how many people would go to a hotel where there'd been a murder after a murder after a murder? I don't know if I would check in. I don't think I'd want to go there.
Listen, I read the Shetland books, and it seems like everyone died in Shetland. So like, you can sustain this for a long time if you want.
Yeah, the only one left is the pony. Yeah. So this was the challenge, and this is the challenge of writing. In the crime world, is you have to find a level of believability where your reader will go with you. Mm-hmm. Also, I wanted a new tapestry to explore. I wanted to investigate a new kind of whodunit, but attach it to something else. And this is something that I've done with each book. I like what I call Frankenstein books that combine two different genres. With the first book, it was a murder mystery. The Maid was a murder mystery on the one hand, but on the other, it was feel-good fiction. It was the kind of novel that it takes you through a journey of the spirit and leaves you with a feeling of hope once you turn that last page. And so with the Maid's Secret, we get a whole new protagonist. We get Molly in the present tense, which readers will know from other books, but we also get to hear from Gran, So for the first time, we get a secondary voice, and we're moved and transported to a different world in the past, where we see the blossoming and blooming of an epic Downton Abbey-esque sort of love story between two characters we actually know from the previous books.
And Molly's grandmother died before the first Molly Gray book. And yet she's a persistent presence, even through The Maid Secret. Like
yes.
Her voice just keeps coming up. And in a sense, Molly's never quite alone because of how strongly she's internalized her grandmother's voice. Is that a relationship that you pulled from somewhere? Is that just something that feels right for you? Where did that come from?
It comes from my mother.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I lost my mother several years ago. Mm-hmm. As Molly would say, she died. Yeah. Why call it anything other than what it is? She died. Mm-hmm. And I learned something that has been immensely valuable since her loss. I was devastated, of course. She was somebody who was so formative and so important to me. And I think Gran is her model in a lot of ways. One of those matriarchal women who brings community around her, who fights with such a loyalty for her people, her family, her community, her friends. And that was my mother. So the loss was a huge one for me. But what I learned, Michael, was that when she was finally gone, she was still with me. In fact, she was more with me after death in some ways than she was in life. Her voice is constantly in my head whenever I need her. She's there. She's there. She's that same voice that Molly hears in her head with her aphorisms and her sayings and her votes of confidence for her daughter. And that experience gave me such a strange kind of faith. I'm not a very faithful person, but the fact that my mother continues to be with me and to be present and distilled for me in my mind gives me great an immense hope, and I wanted to share that with readers.
And I want to pull on one thread from that for just a second, because I think for some people, when they engage with people from their past or they've engaged with people that they've lost, they're thinking about memories, they're thinking about lessons that they've acquired from that person. But you speak very specifically about voice. Are you hearing the things that she has heard, the way that Molly hears her grandmother's voice in her head?
Literally hear my mother's voice. My mother was French Canadian, and I hear the accent in my head. Like literally.
And the turns of phrases.
The turns of phrases. Like my mother used to, say, she would mess up phrases all the time because English was her second language. So she used to say things like, well, Nita, it takes two to tangle. I'm like, Mom, that's not even a saying. It's two to tango, not two to tangle. But these are the sort of sayings that I hear in my head. And when I need her, I know that she's there, you know?
In the first book, Molly's kind of an underdog. And as the books have gone on, she's progressing, as you say, in confidence. She's progressing in relationships. Were you at all concerned about her kind of moving out of that underdog position into being somebody who's kind of more confident and, kind of capable in the world?
Yes, because, as you build a character like that, the question is, where is the conflict going to come from?
Yeah.
You have to figure out a new terrain. And that has to come from the world around them if it doesn't come intrinsically from the inside, right? So there are new challenges that she has to face in this new book. And some of that is about the change in genre and the fact that this is a heist novel, right? Mm-hmm. And again, she gets the rug really taken out from under her when she discovers that she is suddenly exceedingly wealthy.
The other thing that I really like about these books is she's not a near omniscient mystery solver. She's not one of those persons who looks around the room and can immediately put all of the pieces together. No. She notices everything. She's incredibly attentive, but some of that is handed over to the reader. You are getting all of the information. You're both together piecing together this mystery as it happens. And I like that as a mystery reader. I like kind of piecing the story together. Is as you're thinking about the kind of protagonist you're putting into a crime novel, are you thinking about what kind of problem solver they are?
Absolutely. And I think that's a challenge that's particularly difficult for mystery writers, because you need a sleuth of some kind, whether they're a literal detective or not. And of course, the bar is set so high by Sherlock Holmes and Agatha Christie and all the wonderful mystery writers who have blazed trails after them. Mm-hmm. But the question you have to ask yourself in such a well-trodden genre is, what on earth am I going to do that already hasn't been done? Right. And so my answer was to change the kind of detective. Yeah. I wanted a detective who was a little bit different. And so enter Molly the maid. Sherlock walks into a room and he's going to spot, as you say, he's going to spot every anomaly. He's going to put it together before the reader does and then surprise us with his genius. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, what if we invert that trope entirely? Molly walks into the room, misses all the things that the reader sees instantly. And yet somehow she's able to see other things that most people will never notice. And so that is what really propels. That sort of tension between what the reader knows and what Molly sees that the reader doesn't is actually the vehicle by which the drama works. Mm-hmm.
The first book in the series, The Maid, has now sold millions of copies in Canada, and you were on Good Morning America for their book club, and it landed on the New York Times bestseller list. It's won awards. But as you were first writing it, you didn't know any of that. You know, as we have established, a lot about publishing. And that means you know the odds. You know how vanishingly rare it is for a book to find its audience and really sell, like in the hundreds of thousands or more. When did you first know you had a hit on your hands? And was that confidence there from the beginning, or did it come as a surprise?
Gosh, no. I suffer from imposter syndrome. I'm in publishing, for goodness sake.
Double imposter syndrome.
Double, triple. Add the female to that and it's like quadruple. So no, I never ever thought. I thought, if my friends like it and, I can capture a few readers, well, wouldn't that be nice? But no, I definitely did not have absolute confidence that this was a hit. I just tried to write a really, really good story and do the best that I could with that. In fact, I was so lacking in confidence at the beginning of this process that I told nobody I was writing. And when I say I told nobody I was writing this, I really mean it. I didn't tell my partner, I didn't tell my friends, I didn't tell my colleagues in publishing, I didn't tell anyone because I feared, what would happen if people found out and, in our industry, the eyes would roll backwards. Oh gosh, look at another person who thinks they can be a writer. And the only way that I could get through that lack of confidence was getting up in the morning, 5 a.m., lying to my partner about why I've got a lot of work to do, really busy with the editing these days. And really just pleasing myself, writing the book for an audience of one.
So nobody knew?
Nobody. Only when I was done did I, start to slowly reveal the fact that I'd written anything at all.
So this is not an uncommon story.
No, it's not.
And especially for people that are inside the industry, secret novel is kind of a thing.
It is.
Because as much as I love books and have worked among them for my whole career, and have lived with people writing books, it's not the kind of experience that makes me go, yes, give me the keyboard. I want to do that. I've talked to lots of authors and it just seems hard. It seems really hard. But for you've midwifed books into existence as an editor, working alongside authors for years. So when did that switch flip where you're like, yeah, it's gonna I've got one of these and I want to get it out?
I always knew that was something I could try. Uh-huh. I just didn't know if I would succeed. I knew that publishing and being an editor for so long had taught me everything I ever needed to know about narrative. Mm-hmm. And I felt very confident about that. The question is, could I really turn that around and just work for myself and write a story for myself? And that was really difficult at the beginning. Plus, not unlike my protagonist, I had spent 20 years in the shadows pushing my authors into the light. Mm-hmm. That was my job. And then I had to reverse it. I had to step out and show people who I was instead of having somebody else move forward into the spotlight.
And how was that?
Again, there are still moments to this day, and this is, several years later, where I feel like I'm in some sort of Alice in Wonderland spot. Like, why are we doing this, Michael?
At some point, someone's going to come along.
This is weird.
And find the author who's supposed to be here.
It always feels like a weird dream where you're performing the wrong role. Mm-hmm. I've gotten somewhat used to it, but there are still those moments where it's like, wow, yeah, this is the other side. And I always feel a little bit Alice in Wonderland.
At the same time, you were very much at the top of your career as editor-in-chief at Simon Schuster Canada. You had all of these authors who you've been caring for and shepherding along. And, each one of those books is its own special project. How was it setting that aside and saying, only books that I write myself now?
Hard, really hard. It still hurts. The thing about publishing, and you will know this because you're in it, is it is a vocation. Mm. It is more than just a job. We make all kinds of sacrifices to be in this industry for our love of words.
And you have to want it so badly to get to that place that you were.
Absolutely. And you've made so much sacrifice to be there and to be able to be an editor. My goodness, the sacrifices are endless. So to give that up really took me some time. So, for the first couple of years, I couldn't give it up because I loved the books and I loved the manuscripts and I needed to see this one to fruition. Oh, and I can't leave that one behind. I need to complete that one too. And so it took me a couple of years to realize there is no more candle to burn. There is nothing else I can do differently. I am working constantly, and this is not healthy. And, I knew I had to change something. Mm-hmm. And so eventually I had to give up a really great job working with beloved colleagues and wonderful writers to pursue the other side.
And just be a best-selling author.
Just that.
Just that. And has your day changed now? You were a 5 a.m. writer. And so what does that look like now?
I sleep more now.
Awesome.
I do not get up at 5 a.m. anymore because I do not have to. You know, on the other side of things, it's strange not to have colleagues, you know, and there's a wonderful sense of community in publishing. And when you're on the other side, when you're on the writing side, that it does feel a tad lonely. It's you and the blank page, and that can be very daunting.
You've been writing books about Molly Gray for a while now, and you're still finding new places for her to go and new things to happen. Do you miss the eclecticism of editing? You know, that it's a new book and a new manuscript and a new project and a new author every time, compared to it's this book until I get it done.
Yeah, and fiction and nonfiction and memoirs and ghostwriting.
Yeah.
I mean, I loved that. I did. But I think as a writer, I do the same thing. As I mentioned before, I have to Frankenstein books together. I have to put two genres together. Otherwise, it's not enough of a problem to solve as a writer. And I think I will always do that. I think I will always change lanes. I will always try something different, which may not always please my publishers, but it is necessary in order to be creative for me.
It's good to set that expectation.
Yeah,
just
put it out
sprinkle
there.
Those seeds.
Yep.
Next one could be about trains. You don't know. You've said that you learned to be a novelist either over the course of 6 months that you took to write The Maid, or 20 years plus the 6 months.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you're still learning every time you start a new story?
Every time. I have a beginner's mind. And I think the second I don't, I won't write anymore. And I think the writers who I most admire do the same thing. They enter knowing nothing, and they feel lost, and they walk into that labyrinth regardless, and they find their way. And for me, I need that feeling of tenuous discovery every day, of not really knowing what's around the corner, and of surprising myself, and then hopefully, at the end, surprising the reader as a result.
Let's talk about the reader for a second, because especially in books like this, people form attachments. They form attachments to that character. They form attachments to the series. And then you start to go out into the world as an author in the way that you don't as an editor. And people want to meet you, and they want to talk to you about their feelings and their experience of your book.
Yeah.
How has it been just engaging with your readership?
I love my readers. I really do. And, you know, they bring my characters to life. You know, that I really think of my reader as a co-creator. You know, I put the words down on the page, but they're just so minimal. They're elemental. There's so little there. And I really rely on the reader to complete the picture for me, to figure out what that hotel looks like for them, to understand Molly and all her nuances that I don't deliver on the page, and so on. So I start and the reader finishes. So without them, the book doesn't really live. Mm-hmm. And I continue to feel that whenever I meet readers who describe to me, you know, what the book meant to them, or what they see in their mind's eye when they think of Molly, or why these books are special or their characters are meaningful to them.
And do you get surprises in those interactions? Do people come up with takes that you were like, wow, I'd never thought of that?
All the time. I mean, one of my favorite things is when people tell me where the book is set. It's my favorite thing ever. So my readers will, of course, I don't say where the Regency Grand is. I never mention what country, what city, nothing. But readers will come up to me and say, I know where that hotel is. And I'll be like, great, you can tell me. And they're like, oh, it's in Boston. I stayed there last year. And I'm like, you're absolutely right. And then the next reader will come up and they'll say, oh, I know what hotel that is. I know it's the Waldorf Astoria. Tell me I'm right. And I say, yes, you are right. I will say yes.
Everyone is a winner.
Everyone is a winner, chicken dinner, because they did the work. Mm-hmm. The point is for me to give the bare minimum and for them to fill in with their own experiences of hotels, of people, of situations, you know, everything else that is the world of this book. So that, to me, is the greatest compliment a reader could give me when they say they did the work and they see it in their mind's eye. Great. I did something right.
Now we have a new transformation, which is The Maid being made into a film, made into a motion picture. And so then you again get that reinterpretation of the book. And all of those things that have been sitting in your reader's mind and sitting in your mind suddenly becomes solid in the imagination of a director or of a filmmaker. How does that feel?
Well, for me, the most exciting part will be actually seeing that setting of the Regency Grand Hotel, because I've drawn it so minimally, but to see it in Technicolor for the first time, that really is the difference when you see something on a big screen. The lavishness, the elegance, all those Art Deco touches. I cannot wait for that. Like, that is just going to be so delicious for me.
So you don't feel the trepidation of this existed in the imagination and was different for everyone, and now it's going to be fixed in a set of views that everyone gets to see the same thing?
I think of them as parallel arts.
Okay.
They're related arts, but if you get caught in them being the same, then you actually don't respect the difference of the genre. Film is film, and a book is a book, and they're two different media. So, it's not going to be the same. It's going to be a different experience. It's going to be a different world, and I'm excited to see what that might look like.
There are some authors who build a career around a character. There's some people who move from person to person and viewpoint to viewpoint. Is Molly your character, or are there others waiting in the wings who might deserve their own story in the future?
I see The Maid's Secret as really a grand finale.
Okay.
I can imagine maybe in a long time writing another Molly book. Maybe, but not for a long time. She belongs to readers now. I have taken her where she needed to go, and she is now theirs. So I definitely imagine other characters and other worlds and other genres even.
Are you doing more than imagining it?
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe.
Okay,
maybe not.
No, I am. I most definitely am.
Well, we cannot wait to meet that new character when the time is right. But until then, Nita, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
I have been speaking with Nita Prose, author of The Maid Secret. Find it and all the books we've spoken about at Kobo and Conversation's home on the web, kobo.com/conversation. Check in the show notes for a link. Subscribe in your podcast player to catch every episode, and if you enjoyed this one, tell someone who knows some of your secrets. Kobo and Conversation is produced by Nathan Maharaj and hosted by me, Michael Tamblyn. Thank you for listening.